This season of the Good Up podcast is sponsored by Empath Psychological Services. Good Up is our space to talk about those experiences in life we didn't know we all had in common. We're the after work happy hour conversation with your best friend.
You good up bad, like, hello.
The place where you bring up the hard parts of life, the ones that made you laugh, and the things that made you who you are. Because who said becoming good up wasn't a little bit uncomfortable? Stay tuned for more information about this week's episode.
Here at the Good Up Pod, we're all about shedding light on life experiences that have contributed to who we are and learning to navigate them to find a feeling that's, well, good up.
For some of us, that journey includes therapy. Empath Psychological Services operates with the belief that life's challenges are not all of who we are.
They aim to create a non-judgmental environment to help their clients harness their own power and to find their path to mental well-being. Good Up and Empath Psychological Services share a passion for helping others navigate their own healing their way.
If you're interested in teletherapy services in the U.S. Virgin Islands or the state of Texas, check out the link in the description box for more information on how you can book a session with Empath Psychological Services. Hey, beautiful people, and welcome back to the Good Up podcast. I am your host, Blue Ivy Carter.
And I'm Blue Ivy Carter's braids. I'm
And we're
mad you said
both
blue
here.
because I came here prepared to be Blue's braids. That's crazy to me.
Synchronicity. Welcome back to another week of the bullshit. I honestly, what we talking about today? Anyway, we have a guest on the podcast, and I'm thrown off because we have sometimes you bring somebody in a room and you don't have such good conversation. We have been sitting here talking to each other for like the past 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh shit, we have to record an episode.
We have something to do.
Now I'm thrown off by the intro because I'm like, oh, this is formal.
Sorry.
But welcome. We are looking forward to another great episode this week. And we have one of my favorite people in the world on the podcast today. She's actually a Good Up podcast veteran. She's been on the podcast twice. She's actually one of I call them the OG guests. Anybody who was on the first season, I'm like, you were recording with me with no video. I was in a closet, so you real.
You a
Aniska's
guest.
here. Yeah, she was a guest. So
yeah, you're grandfathered in.
Mhm.
I love it.
Yeah.
So tell the people I'm hi, Aniska. Who are you? What do you do?
Hi, people. I don't know how to introduce myself now. I feel like last time I had introduced myself it was so easy. I am Aniska. I am this. So I don't know. Let's see. Hi, I'm Aniska. I am a Gemini.
Happy Gemini season. Happy birthday, girl.
Thank you. Next Monday, I'm a Juneteenth.
And she's a June Gemini. Okay.
Yeah, I'm a June Gemini, the best kind.
June Geminis are my favorites.
Yeah, we are awesome. Like, I am awesome. So that's my introduction. I'm awesome.
Yes,
I am a business owner. I'm a creator. I just do
She
things.
does all the things.
I do all the things. Yeah.
Love it.
But you've been this is your third time on, right? You were on season 1 and then you came on for the first colorism episode we ever did. Right?
And then this is our
third time.
This is your third time on the show.
What?
Your first time was before I joined.
Yep.
And then
Yes, I remember that.
when I think maybe
We did the colorism episode in 2020.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
This is your third
my
time
third
on.
time.
So at this point, you just have to come on every few seasons. Like it's just
I love that.
I love bringing back our good guests.
you're like a standing guest at this point.
Yeah.
It's like certain topics just
exactly.
have to join.
And let me just say this: a lot of people are like, "Oh, I want to be on a podcast." Right? I about to be a shady bitch. Everybody can't be a podcast guest, okay? Because some people think that they have a lot to say, but it's not about having a lot to say. It's about having constructive and like entertaining and good things to add to a conversation.
Yes.
It's about having something to say.
Yeah, ain't about having something.
Yeah.
I have lots to say, bitch. Most of it I say on IG story. I don't set a fuck on a podcast.
You know what?
I come to the podcast with notes.
I think it's not so much that you should have something to say. I think you should have something to add.
Ooh,
Does that make sense?
Yes. What's our theme? Synchronicity. Because I was like, I know where this is going.
You know what that means?
Right.
Like, yeah, it's one thing to have something to say, but what do you have to add?
To add to the conversation.
To the
and Aniska tends to have things to add.
Yes, she always do. Because for me,
also too, I was thinking to myself, I was like, when he told me what the topic was, and it was like people pleasers. I was like, duh, I am like a reformed people pleaser. Like I have been a people pleaser for 25 of my 31 years of life. Of course I have something to add.
I don't know shade to you.
Because I always say that I'm a recovering people pleaser.
Yeah.
I know shade to you, Aniska. Like I was wondering when I asked you if Aniska would, I'll be like, this bitch just call me a people pleaser. But it's because we've had those conversations.
100%. 100%. I'm a recovering people pleaser. It was like, of course I was like, yes. Duh.
I don't dive back into it every now and then. But before we go there, obviously people who listen and that's the conversation topic. But before we go there, we promised y'all last week, also known as a while ago, we promised y'all that we were going to start Deidre's new segment, which is talking about all things astrology as it relates to this specific day and week.
Yes.
Not it's basically your whole life.
Yeah, so I'm not giving nobody
you want a full reading, you run
the
Deidre your fucking money, okay? I am not here to exploit her services.
Thank you for saying that, hey, Isa, because one thing about it, I does this. This is a very detailed ability that I have, okay? It's very time consuming. And if you guys want specific astrological insights, you can book my services. What I'm doing is giving a quick forecast based on where the planets are in this moment that the show is airing. So I'm looking at a chart for July 4th, 2023. The thing to keep a close eye on would have to be the fact that Venus and Mars are currently in conjunction, which is fire.
AKA conjunction.
Oh my God, Schoolhouse Rock. So
I had to say it. I'm so sorry.
Okay, no, but literally, I used to love Schoolhouse Rock. And fun fact, I was obsessed with Interplanet Janet, which makes total sense for an astrologer. Anyway, when I was a little girl. Anyway, so Venus and Mars are currently in conjunction. This is important for many reasons. One, Venus and Mars tend to rule very masculine and feminine aspects about us as individuals. Venus rules love, the joy you experience when you encounter something or someone that you love, art, music. She rules romance, she rules luxury, and in us as individuals, Venus will rule the amount of space we're able to hold for people. So people who tend to be people pleasers most likely have some sort of specific and important Venus aspect. I bring this up because, like I said, Venus and Mars are in conjunction. Mars rules aggression, assertiveness. Mars rules ambition, taking action, how we go to war, how we confront things. So those are like opposing things, right? Opposing energies. But these two planets who rule things that are a little different, they're like kind of holding hands in the park right now, which is great for everybody because there's a bit of a balance between those things. Our capacity to kind of recognize some of those things in ourselves. We have the opportunity to heal certain people-pleasing ways, if you know what I mean. They're in conjunction in the sign of Leo. And what makes this very interesting is a lot of people always assume that people always kind of peg Leo as like the most self-centered sign of the zodiac and all that shit. And it's actually not the case. It's not that Leo is self-centered. Leo cares a lot about everybody, but Leo is ruled by the sun. Leo is naturally the center of the universe. They're magnetic. They care about everybody, but they know how to prioritize what's important. This is the time for you to learn how to focus on yourself more, especially if you're a people pleaser, right? Recognize where, yes, I'm a natural giver. I love helping people. I love taking care of people, but is this at a detriment to me and my wellness? If it is, then I need to pour inward. That's one thing. Two, this is a really good time for creativity. If you're a naturally creative person, or if you're a person who, even if you aren't creative, this is a really good time to learn things about yourself through creative expression. If you're not the type of person who usually approaches a romantic interest, but you kind of really feeling a little motivated, it's because it's a good time to approach that person.
Call him back.
Call him back.
And or woman.
Don't say it. Don't say it. This is going to look different for everybody. It's going to look different based on your own personal birth chart. And if you want to know how this affects you on a personal level, then hit the link in my bio at Finding Deidre, book a reading, and I will not only interpret it for you, but teach you how to do it yourself. You're welcome.
I may have to book a reading.
Listen, Deidre is about that fucking life. Okay?
I love this shit.
Yeah, Deidre will be back every week.
Every week, y'all.
To give y'all these forecasts. We just figured, being good up, we always talk about it. Being good up covers a lot of different aspects. Okay?
Absolutely.
Y'all saw that we had a branding change this season. And the inspiration behind that, our one word that we stuck with, or two words that we stuck with, was Alien Superstar. Because when we thought about that song and the lyrics and the concept of Alien Superstar, we were like, that's what being good up feel like. Like, it's like you on your shit in every aspect of your life. So sometimes it might be you need some guidance in the gym. Sometimes it might be you listening to the podcast because you need some guidance on like social stuff. And astrology could tap in there too. So today's episode, it's actually about people pleasing, like we said earlier. And again, I always come in with a definitions.
Yes.
Because I like definitions. So
it's required for this.
It's required, right? And I need Aya to know that when we talk about subjects, I ain't just pulling it out of my ass. There is a term for it. So people pleasing is when we suppress or repress our own needs, desires, expectations, feelings, and opinions to put others ahead of ourselves so that we can gain attention, affection, validation, approval, and love. This definition just drag a couple bitches.
No, because I just sat here and said, I wish we gave a trigger warning.
I could picture some of your ponytails on the floor right now. Like it's very so here are some common signs. Here are some common signs of people pleasing. So one is deferring your own needs, obviously. The next one is agreeing with everyone, struggling to say no or to establish boundaries, feeling responsible for other people's emotions. And that one just hot up my heart space a little bit because I feel, oh my God, I am very, very triggered by that one. Avoiding conflict, also hot space, hot up, and apologizing all the time.
Oh God, drag me.
That one.
I am going to start off our conversation and bring everybody to the mat on this one. My first question is, in what ways or situations do you silence your own opinions, wants, or needs? I am not going to ask you in what ways do you think you people please, because I specifically want to call out any behaviors that we might still be doing that might be people pleasing.
Okay.
So again, in what ways or situations do you silence your own opinions, wants, or needs?
I feel like I should be a gracious co-host and let Aniska go first.
Okay, this is good. And this is good because the first thing I thought of is like, is that people pleasing, or is that me not giving a fuck? Because a lot of the time, like sometimes it's at work, or sometimes it could be in my relationships too, right? Where I will hit a wall where I'm like, nothing I say here, no opinion I share here is going to alter the decision you make. So I'm not going to say anything. And I think that's like, I have set myself up in a way where I will sidestep all the time, whether it's intentionally or not. It's very protective of self. So I don't know if I'd call that people pleasing in those situations. Have I not shared my opinion? No, actually, no. I've never not shared my opinion in recent, but again, hey, eyes and nose, because you know my background. I didn't share my opinion for so long. Now sometimes I share without even being asked. Like if I'm in the room and something happened, you'll know what I have to say about it, what my thoughts are on it. But that's because for so long I did exactly that, right? Bite my opinion on what I like, what I didn't like, how I wanted to be treated, how I didn't want to be treated. So I don't know. I don't think I answered the question.
That's fine. So, I mean, is there any area of your life, because I think that's a good point, is that sometimes we don't share our opinion or our desires or our wants or our needs because we're dealing with somebody who is, again, like a brick wall, and there's no point in doing it because you know, at some point you have to protect yourself. But do you think in any instances sometimes maybe you don't because you don't want a person to become upset or
I mean, of course, I've been known to do that. Like, that's like my track record in almost all my romantic relationships, right? Like, I've been known to squash my opinion. I also, like, you know, I don't know what you call it, but being raised as a Caribbean woman, being like designated to be submissive, of course, like I've been known to put my opinion aside, or to put my, you know, my thoughts aside in those particular spaces. I can't say I always do that in like work or with my friendship because there's a safeness there that's like established. But yeah, of course, I feel like all of us have. I feel like there is, all of us have had that moment where we are so worried about this person that we love or this person that we value and we don't want to rock the boat. So we just sidestep our opinion a bit. I feel like that's extremely normal. I think it becomes detrimental when it is to your earlier point, when it is to like the detriment of my well-being, my peace, my happiness, you know, like you don't always have to share your opinion, but when you stifle your opinion so much that you make yourself unhealthy, that's when you have to look at yourself and you have to be like, okay, I am people pleasing to the detriment of my sanity. That's not going to help me in the long run, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So Deidre, I'm gonna turn the mic over to you, and you and Aniska both declared earlier that y'all are retired or
recovering
people. So what does that mean? Does that mean that at one point you was out here just like,
oh hell yeah,
I'm so
sorry? So in the present, the only time I catch myself being a people pleaser is when it comes to Dylan. I have a hard time, I won't say I have a hard time setting boundaries with him, but if Dylan asks, 9 times out of 10, the answer is yes. The only time the answer is no is when it's something that could cause him harm. So that's the only time I catch myself still leaning into how, you know, my people pleasing ways. But I consider myself a recovering people pleaser because the way that I showed up as a people pleaser, it wasn't so much my opinion, but it was my needs. My needs always took a back seat because I always felt like I had enough. And in reality, I didn't have enough. So for me, I always felt like I had to do for others, do for this person, make sure this person was good. I hated saying, I really did hate saying no to people that I care about. I have a vivid memory of me and Diamond being maybe like 14. She'd asked me to do something. And for the first time, I had to tell her no. I don't even remember why I had to tell her no, but first of all, it ate me up to tell her no.
Listen,
it wasn't even a simple no. You know how everybody's saying these days, oh, no is a complete sentence?
Yeah.
Girl, before I even got to the no, I gave her this whole explanation and run around. And I'm like, so basically the long and short of it is I can't do it. And she's like, okay. And she moved on. But I think I harassed Diamond for like a solid half hour asking her if she was mad at me for telling her no. And she got mad at me. Yeah, she got mad at me because I kept asking her if she was mad. And it was like, are you mad at me, Diamond? She's like, no. And I'm like, you sure? Like, I would do it if I could. And she's like, I know. I'm like, I just don't want you to be upset with me. So that was me a lot of the time. The other ways, like I said, I showed up mostly as somebody who always felt the need to meet other people's needs, and my needs would tend to take like a back seat. I was always comfortable with sharing my opinions. I would, of course, avoid opinions that I felt would hurt people's feelings. But for me, because, hey, I'm an Aquarius, it is what it is. If my opinion was based in fact, and to this, as long as my opinion is based in fact, baby, I'm going to say what I want to say. I'm proud to say that the places where I've never showed up as a people pleaser is the workplace. I am very confident in the workplace because I invest a lot of my energy into mastering skills. And so for me in the workplace, I does this, I know what I'm doing. And I'm doing it for a reason.
I will say, like, as far as like the workplace, and this is something my therapist and I had to work through, I have always worked in spaces that are non-POC dominant, right? Like I work in very white spaces. I don't know it's America, but like industry I work in, those spaces lack people that look like me. And I used to show up super agreeable. Like I did not want to be the aggressive, angry, anything. Like, and my therapist was always like, well, if that's your concern as being completely agreeable, how are you doing your job? I'm super fucking good at my job, So I don't have to be agreeable. I have to show up and do my job. I don't have to be I don't have to people please any of y'all. I have to do my job.
And then you also have to ask yourself, like, in all of my agreeableness, what changes for the people that I'm being agreeable for, especially when it comes to white people in the workspace. I have been that person too, where like I'm the most agreeable. I gonna show up, I gonna show out, I gonna do everything in my power. And we were talking about it in the last couple of episodes when we were talking about burnout and how Black women show up to work. But in doing all of that, like, is me being agreeable going to change if a person decides to be racist, or if I experience a microaggression, or it's or not really,
and you know, I definitely, and this is kind of touching back on the code switching, I used to make sure, even though I'm not agreeing with you, let me tell you something. One thing I know how to do, honey, is be sweet with people. So I could disagree with you respectfully and sweet and all that shit. But then I kind of had to get to a point where I'm like, this is not necessarily my nature and it's exhausting. But also, no matter how sweet I show up, they're still going to see me as an angry Black woman. So I'm going to just be myself. I'm just going to be who I have to be. Because whether I come sweet as sugar or I come extremely assertive, matter-of-factly, they're still going to perceive me as aggressive. But what they can never say is that she came with inaccurate information. They can never say that I fumbled the bag or the responsibilities. So I'm gonna show up and be like dominant. Like in the workplace, I tend to, people always assume I'm a fire sign when I'm in the workplace. Like, cause I come in like, this is the job, this is what needs to be done. Like,
I feel like Deidre and I are very like kindred flames in a way, right? Like, just listening to us talk, and I feel like I unlearned so much of my people pleasing through my workplaces, right? Like I do event production here in the city, and like I have to be so mindful of showing up and being like, no, this is what my client needs. This is what we are going to provide. Like there's no sugarcoating or softening that, right? And that almost had to force me out of my people pleasing. Like some people I have an obligation to, and in order to meet that obligation that's paying my bills, I have to show up and be aggressive and fire sign, which is not me at all.
I know, same. You know where I am the worst as a people pleaser though is in my interpersonal relationships, my romantic relationships and my relationships with like friends and family. That's where 100%. Baby. Oh, I was the worst kind of people pleaser.
Me over.
I can let the listeners know right now. I am the one bitch on this call who is not a reformed people pleaser. I am still in this bitch. Struggling.
We'll be your sponsors. We'll see you at the next meeting.
And I can't even say that I've been working on it and I'm gonna be honest with you, sometimes you don't start to acknowledge that something is a problem until very late in life. And I've recently acknowledged that a lot of things are problems, and in my head I'm just like, okay, I can only work on one of these fucking things at once. So this is why I'm still in the stage that I'm in. But what I will say is that I see a lot of people-pleasing tendencies in a lot of different areas of my life. Work definitely used to be one of them, but I've noticed that, like Aniska just said, when I went into a management position, I kind of had to force myself out of that people-pleasing tendency, because the reality of it is what works for my team and my department ain't necessarily what works for you. And I kind of had to be like, okay, that's nice, but we ain't doing that shit. Like, no, the answer is no. And I would be lying if I said there haven't been times where I felt like, when I feel like I've made someone mad or uncomfortable or upset with me, I don't get so like, was there a different way I could have worded it? Can I go back tomorrow and fix it? Like, what do I do? I don't be driving home like, oh my God, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Like, because I can stand up for myself in a moment, but for me, what my struggle with people pleasing is the thought process that happens after I've stood up for myself. Like, I could do it, I could set the boundary, but after I set the boundary, I'd be like, oh my God, why did I say that?
You know,
driving home like, bitch, you could have been
nicer. But you know, that's the beauty that comes with being a people pleaser is we have a certain level of self-awareness that most people don't have.
100%.
And so with that being said, the things that you're feeling like, oh, that could have been nicer, I promise you it didn't need to be nicer.
I wanted to make a point because I know Deidre and I said like we are recovering people pleasers, and you said that you still are. And you never really stop being a people pleaser, right? It's like being it's not as bad as
like an addict. Yeah, it's like being an addict.
You actively, like, I actively have to make the choice every single day to not put my feelings and my wants and desires on the back burner. Like, I'm very much in the middle of figuring that out right now. And my girlfriend tells me, my best girlfriend in the world, she tells me all the time, like, you have this habit of putting aside all of your desires to meet the desire of other people. And like, Deidre, when I tell you that your session before this dragged me so much because so much of my well-being and like my mental health, the things I'm working on right now are so deeply rooted in bypassing my own desires for other people. But it's an active choice. Like, I actively have to engage the part of myself that's like, no, Aniska, you too. No, Aniska, you next. No, Aniska, they could wait. Get it for yourself first, you know? So it's like, you'll get out of it. But even when you get to the part that Deidre and I are at of being recovering, there are still moments where you will relapse. You have to actively choose.
You have to actively choose. And even like, and where I know for certain it gets really bad for me is when I'm in like a romantic relationship. And like, I had to like take time to look back at my past relationships and really like literally like look in the mirror and examine the ways that I've abandoned myself for the relationship, and the ways that I recognize that I've in, especially the relationships that I were like the ones that were serious, right? And I had to recognize, like, Deidre, you had to rebuild yourself after that relationship because you completely abandoned, like, I literally abandoned myself in certain relationships. You know what I mean? And then I'm like, okay, you cannot do that. And so even now, anytime I find myself getting involved with somebody, I have to be very intentional about not letting myself like slip, you know, like I have to be really good. And I've gotten a lot better about it because when I recognized it, it was when me and Dylan's dad were like in a relationship, and I kind of recognized, like, I didn't recognize myself. I was putting up with shit I had no business putting up with. And eventually I ended that relationship. And then I went through a period where I became the opposite, where because I was trying so hard to heal from that, I became like the most self-centered person you would ever date.
I'm either on one extreme end of the spectrum or the
other.
I'm either like extremely to the point where like I'm completely bypassing my own needs, or like fuck everybody and everything, don't talk to me.
One thing about it, two things for sure. My therapist, like, she's the fourth coming of Christ. Like, I love her. Like,
I love my listen.
She's like my everything, I swear. And the reason why I love her so much is because she reaffirms those parts of me that can be exploited through people pleasing, right? So like, I'm so soft. I'm the softest girl. I'm a lover girl. Like, that's just my vibe. I just love it. Like, nothing
it's fun.
It's fun. Nothing in this would change that.
Yeah.
And my therapist always reminds me that, like, it's okay to be soft. It's okay to leave any romantic space you're in and still find the desire for that in the future. You have to be very careful though when you're a people pleaser, because that easily can turn into a toxic environment, one that you are exploited in. So you have to be very mindful of it.
Exactly.
But one thing I'm very grateful for in transitioning out of my people pleasing is that I've been able to maintain like this softness to me. Like,
I love it.
Like, it doesn't, it that part of me is still very,
and that's
very present.
And that was the beauty of that journey, is because I went through that period of being very self-centered, but it was outside of my nature. So I said, okay, Deidre, you're not being yourself right now. So you need to learn how to be yourself, but protect yourself in that process. So like, even like you referenced being soft, I am so soft. Even like every ex I've ever had, one thing they always say, Deidre, you have such a soft heart. And it's true. So I said, okay, I'm not going to harden my heart. I like having a soft heart. I like melting into my person. I love to feed man. And that's my problem. Listen. I love to cook for man. I like to listen. I love my man them.
Okay? My softness stops in the kitchen. Okay, I don't do that.
I don't know what it is, but
I will do anything for you. But if you require a meal, if you require sustenance,
I love feeding man. I don't know.
Then you come here.
But in any case, so I had to learn, like, okay, Deidre, you get to be yourself, but you have to protect that part of yourself, and you have to wait until somebody has earned that version of you before you can become that person. And you also have to be okay with, if there's something about somebody that you don't like, you have to find a way to make it known. You also have to make sure you're in alignment with people, so you're not abandoning yourself. So I had to really root myself into myself so that I could let go of that people pleasing.
Listen, Steven taught me a very important lesson once, one that I still have not fully learned, but he made an important point once, which was, it was right after my former close friend had lived with us and moved out. If you listen to the podcast, and if you know me personally, you know that was a very just like stressful, negative experience.
People pleaser.
It was peak people, but it was peak people pleaser, because for me, it does come out in relationships, but like I was saying earlier, I haven't done a whole lot of like serious relationships. Like I've done a lot of casual dating, which it comes out there. It definitely does come out there, or used to come out there. But for me, it's like work and friendships, especially, and family is where that shit to just rile up the most. And for me, if my friend is struggling in any way, if my friend needs something, I am not the person who gonna just like help you with what you asked for. I am going to go above and fucking beyond, right?
Yeah.
So people have come to live with me. People have, like, I will open my home to you. I will give you the last $500 I get in my savings account. I will do, like, this is who I am. And a part of it is I see that, like, a lot of people don't have that person in their life who is either just financially in a position to help them like that. Yeah. So I feel like if I've worked this hard to get to this point in my life and I have the ability to do it, I'm gonna do it. But the other part of it is I want to fix the problem for this person. Like I want to people please. Yeah. So this person in this scenario ended up living with me. They left. It was very negative. And when they left, I was talking to Steven, and I apologized to him. And I'm like, you know, I'm sorry for putting you in that position and for putting our marriage in, because this person ended up living with us in the first year of our marriage, which thank God that we, you know, I married the right person and we did fine. Yeah. But like, that was a very stressful situation to be put in that early, especially as I kept thinking about it from his perspective. As a husband, you want your wife to be happy and you want her friends to be okay. And like, Steven fully understood the reason why I was helping this person, and like he was game for it, but I could tell he was in no point at the situation was he comfortable. So when it was over, I was like profusely apologized. So now I had to take my people pleaser back to my husband. I'll be like, I'm so sorry. I should have never do it. And and he was like, okay, so you're the person who, if somebody needs a home, you're going to give them a home. If you find a stray dog on the street, you're going to take in the stray dog. And he absolutely right, because I've literally housed stray cats and like,
same. My mom couldn't stand that shit about me.
Crazy. What's the difference then between, because in my head, I see the difference, but I just want to know what you guys think. What's the difference between being a people pleaser and being a rescuer? And does that have something to do with the level of control we like to have in situations?
I think it's the motivation behind it.
Yeah, I think for sure there's an intersectionality. And I think it's when you've been through a certain amount of, whether it's trauma or disenfranchisement, whatever the case may be, if you've been the underdog in any fashion,
you don't want to save everybody.
You want to save everybody, especially when you get some semblance of power. That's for lack of a better term, power, right? Whether it's financial power, whether it is influence in the workplace. Once you get to a point where you can help people in any fashion, you're going to do it. You know, you're going to pull people up. Like one of the things that I was so adamant about doing in any job I do, but wherever I have influence, I'm calling the names of people who deserve it. I'm shouting people out who deserve it. It's just in you. I don't, but I think the two things cross each other.
I think I relate to that question very heavily, because for me, it's a little bit of both, right? On one end, I'm a person who has experienced a lot of violence in my life, but also like was somebody who, in experiencing a lot of that violence, like the adults in my life either didn't recognize that I was experiencing it or like didn't come to my rescue, basically. So for me, if I see a person struggling and I'm the person who could fix the problem, I gonna try to fix the problem.
Same.
But on the other side of that,
the
other side of it, I think with people pleasing, the motivation behind it is like, how do I want this person to feel about me at the end of this, right? It's not even just, I think rescuers do self-sacrifice a lot of their own needs, but it's not always because they want the person to love them at the end. For people pleasing, I think it centers heavily on like, I'm doing this for this person so they don't hate me in the end. Or I'm going to say yes to this thing so this person isn't mad at me. Sometimes so those things though.
Or even so they know that I love them.
Yeah.
So that they have, there's never a question in their heart that I love them. I'm going to do whatever it takes for this person to know that I love them. And it's like,
and in this scenario that I talked about,
it shouldn't take that much.
Yeah, it shouldn't take that much. And in this scenario that I'm talking about, this was a person who was very critical of a lot of things, of me as a person, of my life, of just other people's decisions. And it would come off in a very like, haha, that's a funny kind of way. So I think a part of me was trying to gain a part of me was worried that if I did not say yes to helping them, that this person would dislike me at the end, right? And this was somebody who I'd been friends with for a long time. But then there was that rescuer part of it too, where I was like, well, if I don't help this person, who the hell gonna help this? Like, who gonna take care of he? Because he and, you know, in full transparency, he had just lost a close family member. Like, he was going through a lot at the time. And I was like, if I don't take care of this person, who the hell gonna help he? So bringing it back in the end, when I was talking to Stephen about it and apologizing, he made that you know, description of me of like, you're the person who's going to like rescue the stray animal, give your friends your last dollar, give them a place to stay. And he was like, and in all of those scenarios, like, I will always support you because it's because you are a good person. And he's like, but I wish you would I wish you wouldn't be so afraid to draw the line on who you help. He's like, you don't have to help everybody.
Yes, that's
literally do not have to help everybody.
That's one of the things me and my therapist worked on. And even where I said like earlier, like, yeah, you could be yourself, but you have to be protective of that and do it for the right people. One of the things me and my therapist worked on is developing my discernment. So I know who truly needs my help and who just need to help themselves, right?
And who also deserves your help, right? Like,
who deserves it, and being a little bit discriminating, quite frankly.
And keeping in mind that sometimes when you ask yourself that question, you might be talking about people you really, really, really care about.
Oh, trust me, I had to learn that lesson with actual like blood. We tend to be doing for others what we wish somebody would do for us. And baby, when the girlies told me that, I said, well, fuck you too. Because
maybe like, I almost scrapped the mic and fling the fuck after the cover just now.
That fucker hit me in the chest. I said, wait a minute.
I recognize that a lot of my people pleasing comes from my mother, right? And her people pleasing with her mother. So this is always connect. Like, every time we talk about that new subject, I'd be like, remember when we talked about generational curses? But so this and I always worry about bringing up my mother again on this podcast.
Listen,
it's always going to happen because we're always talking about mental health and the things that made us who we are. And I'm sorry, Maria make me who I is. I apologize, mommy, if you listen.
I love you, Miss Maria.
Like, so my mom had a very tumultuous and complicated relationship with her mother. Her mother didn't raise her. And I think my mom's life in many ways has been defined by her trying to convince her own mother that she was worthy of that love, right? And it's incredibly heartbreaking. And my grandmother, God rest her soul, was a phenomenal woman, but also a very complicated and very fucked up woman. Like, if you listen,
it just is what it is. We can't.
She was a very fucked up person, especially when it came to her children. So my mom has this like, even though you didn't raise me, even though you don't appreciate anything I do for you, I am going to go above and beyond for you every time. At the end of my grandmother's life, my mother was her sole caretaker, right? When my grandmother died, everybody knows this happened a couple of months ago. I went home. My mom was making sure that my grandmother got her last wishes, which was to be buried. Like, my mom took care of all the funeral arrangements, all of that stuff. I remember being in the car the night before the funeral, and my mom's just like, I think maybe for the wake, I should probably make a salad. I should do this. I just coming up with more shit to do. I straight up told my mother, you are doing so many things right now. You are overcompensating for a woman who is already dead. And if you are if it's not for she, and if it's for anybody who attended that funeral, they are alive and living and have 2 legs and 2 arms, hopefully, and could do for themselves at this point. Your mother is the one who died and she is dead. Like, I don't understand what is the motivation, because it was at a point where like we had been, and this came out at like exhaustion. Grief. Like, I also was like grieving at this time, right? Again, the next day after the funeral, I was like, Ma, that was incredibly inappropriate to say to you. I apologize. I understand your mom just died. But like, I was like, Ma, you, everything that you're doing, it feels like you're trying to show her one last time that you're worthy of her. And I'm like, let me tell you something. Have you ever asked yourself if she was worthy of having you as a child?
Say it.
Because like, all of this you doing for her, and she never deserved it. She didn't earn it. She's on none of that shit. So like, why are we here? So anyway, telling her my mother business again. But like, I got so frustrated in that moment. And sometimes though, you don't need somebody to be like, for the fuck what? Like, what you doing all of that for?
Yeah, it's true. We need that. And sometimes even that, right, is the best way to help somebody. Sometimes they don't need our money. They don't need to stay with us. They don't need nothing but words.
I think it's also very important to keep in mind, again, we all are like super self-aware, and not everybody has that. But being aware in the fact that sometimes we people please to prove that we love somebody, or to prove that we invested, or to prove that we care. Other times we people please simply to fill a perception that other people have of us, right? Like, I people please so I people please so I like, I seem this way, or I present this way, or, you know, everybody will refer to me as this way. And I remember, I will never forget, my sister and I were having a conversation. My best friend in the whole world, I love her down. Like, she is my saving grace sometimes, even though she get on my nerves. And she was like, something was happening. And I'm like, I'm just so kind. Like, I'm like a ball of bubbles. Like, I always just like this is how I am all the time. And my sister and I were like talking about something, and she was like, you are such a bitch. And I was like, the moment she said that, was like, wait, retract. How do I adjust so she doesn't think I'm like that? How do I adjust so she doesn't see me as that way? And it's almost like my sister had seen the wheels turning in my head, and she was like, that's not a bad thing, right? She was like, there's nothing wrong with your disposition being what that is, which is like, you know, I talk with my hands. I'm very pointed. If I know I come in with facts, I'm going to give my opinion.
Period.
Sometimes I give opinions that's not asked of me.
Big air sign energy, period.
Yes. So what I realized in that moment, and something my therapist and I talk about often, is that there's a huge difference between being kind and being nice. I had actually posted something on my Instagram stories a while ago too.
I had a conversation.
I'm so kind. I'm kind down to the ground. I'm the kindest person you meet. Like, my intent, it might not always come off that way. It might not always show up that way, but my intention, especially for the people I care about, is always rooted in kindness. I'm not nice. There's nothing about me that is nice. There's nothing about me that wants to present as nice anymore, right? Like, it's not my job. It's my job to show up in my kindness. But like, looking back at all my years of people pleasing, I realized I was showing up as nice so that I would fit the perception.
You know what's funny too? So many people at work, and this kind of ties back into that last episode on code switching. So many people in the workspace think that I am a nice person, right?
Which is wild.
And most people in my personal life recognize that
they
really is a kind person, but Hayes is a fucking asshole. Like, everybody who knows me personally accepts that about me. But I like, you have a good point. In that people pleasing, I didn't want him to see asshole Hayes because I'm like, but I don't want him to think about me that way.
No, I'm kind. So I will show up in kindness, but it's not my job to present to any of you how you perceive me.
Exactly. Because you know what? It comes down to, and this is always my objective, as long as I'm not being harmful to people, I'm going to be how I feel today. I'm going to be authentic to how I'm feeling today. Listen, there's a space that I spend a lot of time in where there's a lot of white women, and I don't think white women like each other.
They're not nice people. for the most part.
No. They're not nice people, but they act nice. And that's my point, is that niceness that we were just discussing, they have mastered it. But when I'm sitting there overhearing their conversations and they're catching up with each other, I'm like, they don't sound like they like each other at all. Like, they sound so uninterested in being there, but they're being nice. And how's Jack? Really? Oh my God. And I'm like, I can't do it.
I've heard white women in the workspace like disparage somebody in like the nicest. They're just like, I wonder if and you just like, did you just call this person a broke bitch? Like, you
literally just called her the brokest bitch there ever was. Yeah, they were
doing such like a, I'm curious.
They've mastered it.
Oh, listen, when a white woman says she's curious, baby, run. Yeah. Because she's gonna drag you. You're gonna sit on and feel like your shoes. Listen, by the time a white woman done with you, you feel like your toes hanging over the fucking shoe, the fucking like your love handles poking up, because they're gonna quite like.
Listen, I have a dynamic like that at work that I'm trying to navigate, right? And someone recently gave me advice where they said, if a white woman keeps questioning you, ask questions back, right?
Yes.
And like question their questioning, right? Don't get defensive. Don't just answer the question. Make it seem like their misunderstanding of the information you're trying to give them is their fault, right? So I tried that a day. And the same person who's like the source of the issue just kept asking questions while I was presenting something, and she was just like, oh, I'm curious about this, or asking questions about it. So at one point I was like, do you care to explain like what part of the presentation or this topic, like what is most confusing you? What is like the barrier here in your ability to like understand fully or like move forward with this conversation, right? And I worded it I didn't word it just like that, but like I worded it in that way of like, what you're here, I need you to get here. What is stopping you from being like thumbs up on this shit, right?
Yeah.
And how can you explore that for yourself in the next 30 seconds so you could stop wasting my fucking time, right? So I asked her a question, and you could tell she was like taken aback by the fact that I was like, the problem here is you. We are in a room of 30 people. The only person who keep asking fucking questions on this same, she kept kind of digging in.
You know, my favorite thing is, what do you need from me for this to make more sense?
Which is pretty much what I said. I said, what do you need for me to explain? Like, what part of this do you need clarity on so that we can move on? And when I said we can move on, you could tell she was just like, oh, this. So she answered a question, and
because you weren't being nice. You weren't being nice.
So then when she started trying to ask her question for like, what would it take for her to understand? Somebody else was like, oh, but yeah, hey, Isaac has said that earlier. So what she was saying was da 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 da. And then she was like, oh, okay, I get it now. And we moved on.
Yeah.
It's so funny how people will like make you overcompensate. And if you're a people pleaser, you don't realize how much you're doing
get
it.
fully baited. It's like quicksand. Before you know it, you just sinking and sinking and sinking. Like,
The minute somebody will ask me a question or like not understand something or not be happy with something I deliver, and it will cause me to go into this spiral of like overcompensating instead of just fixing the one thing that they asked me to fix. And it's like, why do I do that? Why am I doing more labor so this person gonna be happy with me? What if they're happy with a shit regard? What if they're just an unhappy person? In your working on your people pleasing ways, like what's one tip you would give to someone who wants to cut the shit basically and like people please less?
I would say stop apologizing so much. 9 times out of 10, you're saying sorry and you don't even need to say it. Like that need you feel to say sorry for something, stop. If you're in the grocery store and you say excuse me because somebody's in your way, you don't have to apologize for them having to move out your way. They're in your way. Excuse me. You walk past and keep it pushing. You don't have to sorry. No. And let's be clear. Let me just soften that blow. I only know that because I was once that person.
Listen, as a fat person, I don't apologize for taking up space a lot.
I really want to see you stop doing that. I really want to see you stop doing that. I used to be that person who would be like, excuse me. And then when they move, I'd be like, sorry for what, bitch? You was in my way. So now
I need to work on that.
Yeah. So now I recognize like this person's cart is in the middle of the aisle and they are being inconsiderate. I'm not being inconsiderate for needing them to move out of my way. They're being inconsiderate for leaving their fucking cart in the middle of the fucking aisle. So, hey, excuse me. Or sometimes if you're really feeling nasty, I just move the cart out the way because that's clearly what you want me to do. You expect somebody else to move your cart if it didn't occur to you that other people need to come up and down this aisle. So I'm either going to say, excuse me, and they're going to move their cart, or I'm just going to move the cart for them. And then you know what's going to happen? They're going to say, oh, I'm so sorry. And they're going to move their shit. And then you're not going to apologize for taking up space that you deserve to be in. That's my tip.
Okay, Aniska.
Hey, I just said, damn, who said me? ¿Quién te manda?
My tip would be that you can't pour from an empty cup, and you can't ask people for something you aren't already giving yourself. I feel like so much times when we people please, like we've all said, it's to receive something from someone that we feel like we lack in, whether that's safety or acceptance or security or love, whatever it is, we people please to receive that. My hope for myself anyway, or for any of us, is that we first pour those things into our own cups.
Yeah.
So we don't have to seek it outside of our own beings, right?
Yeah.
Like I want to provide myself with unlimited self-love, unlimited assurance, unlimited finances, resources, whatever it is. I want to make sure I am full enough that whenever I do something, it is led with the intention of, I just love this person and I want them in my space, versus, oh, I need this person and I need them to reciprocate this thing, you know? So you can't pour from an empty cup, and you should never want something from someone that you can't first provide for yourself, would be my tip.
I like that one.
Yeah. Mine is, I think, especially for people who people please in romantic relationships or friendships, is to ask yourself about like the most effortless like instance of love, right? Like think about just one relationship in your life where it just feels effortless. There's not much you have to do. That person just like love you down bad for no reason, right? Basically. And ask yourself how hard you've had to try to gain that love from that person. Like, and then ask yourself why you try in other instances to get that same kind of love, right? I think the reason I don't try to impress that logic on myself and on people is because sometimes we're working hard for people who, again, don't deserve that work. It takes me back to that conversation about like my grandmother, right? Asking yourself like, if I don't have to try this hard to be loved and to gain this like thing that I need from other people, why am I trying so hard in these specific cases? And do they deserve that type of energy? And if they require that type of energy from me, why? Like, why do you need me to do all this for you to show me that you love me? But all that to say, I think that people pleasing is common to many of us. I think that there is a way out. I can't say that I have found my way fully out yet, but I am encouraged by the former people pleasers that there are things that I can work on. Recovering. I think we need to, at some point in the season, really talk about just like emotional unavailability and how that affects people, because it leads to shit like people pleasing. It leads to so many other things. But like, what happens to a child when they are raised by an emotionally unavailable parent? What happens to a person when they are dating an emotionally unavailable person? And like, what does all of that lead to? Because I think we'd talk about so many different topics on this show. All of it tends to lead back to like, oh, well, my mother was like this, or my parents were like that, or I dated this one person who was like this.
Honestly, like, shout out to Freud. Like, the girlies went through a period of trying to discredit Sigmund Freud, but the man had a point.
So yeah, we'll definitely talk about that maybe this season, maybe next, who knows. And speaking of this season, before we wrap things up, thank you to Aniska for being on the episode with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome back anytime, because this was such a good conversation.
You're a standing guest.
Standing guest for sure. And then shout out to the sponsor of this literal entire season of the Good Up podcast, Empath Psychological Services. With all that being said, we'll be right back here next week. In the meantime, you could tag us on your social media platforms. We love to hear your comments on the episode. We love to get reviews. We love to hear how we're doing. If there's anything you want us to talk about, or if we said something crazy during the episode and you reacting to it, like, put all of it on social media, because your posts lead other people back to the podcast.
Absolutely.
If you want a little bit more, you could join the Good Up VIP section over on Patreon. The lowest tier is $1. Vivo, it's $1. Okay, a month, $1 a month. And we have a private Facebook group for all of our patrons. We release bonus content during the season. You get access to the full video of the episode. I don't know about Ayo, but Deidre look fucking good, and I really appreciate being able to look at her all the time. So could just slide me $1 to do it.
You know, it's so funny because I was gonna say y'all get to witness like Hey Isa grow out her hair. We have not seen Hey Isa with long hair in a long time.
I started the podcast bald.
Oh my god!
Yeah, you started bald, and
I started the podcast.
You started
bald.
it bald, and so we get to enjoy Hey Isa grow out those gorgeous curls.
Journey.
And you guys
I didn't
get to
even know this stuff. I remember now.
Yes, and you guys get to enjoy our facial expressions because one thing we're gonna do is do the most with these. Like we're gonna react. And you're gonna get to enjoy the facial expressions, honey. So yeah, sign up for the Patreon. Thank you to our existing patrons. You guys know you definitely saved my seat on this show because of that meltdown I had.
When I say keep the lights on, I am so dead ass serious. Y'all literally keep the lights on.
Y'all keep the lights on.
So thank y'all for everything. We'll see y'all right back here next week on another episode of the Good Up Motherfucking Podcast. Deidre, tell the people then bye. This season of the Good Up Podcast is sponsored by Empath Psychological Services. The Good Up Podcast is Black woman hosted and produced by Deidre Ritter and Heiza Quinones Ivory. Find us on all social media platforms at Good Up Pod. Tag us using the hashtag Good Up Tuesday and join the VIP section over on Patreon for exclusive bonus content at patreon.com/GoodUpPodcast.